All right, folks, I just got done watching Godfather of Harlem season 4, the premiere episode of the season. And before I begin, I just want to say this review and my take contains spoilers. So if you haven't seen the season premiere of Godfather of Harlem, I suggest you bypass this video and then watch Godfather of Harlem and then come back and listen to the review. Okay, so season 4, it started out quite surprising because I didn't really picture this kind of beginning. I kind of pictured season 4 starting at Malcolm X's funeral, but the choice to forego that and jump a year later to the trial was pretty good and very unexpected one. I didn't really see this coming. I didn't even really see that Omar would be a defendant in this trial because Omar was one of Malcolm X's chief guards and whatnot, and he was on the planning committee with Bumpy Johnson's men, Chance and Pettigrew. So I don't get why he's on trial here because when Malcolm got shot, Omar jumped on. Omar was doing his best to subdue the killers and the people that were responsible. And then he saw Betty, and then when he reached in Malcolm's sleeve jacket and retrieved the gun that he gave Malcolm X earlier to defend himself. So and his thing was, well, something. If the police see this, they're gonna think two niggas were shooting at each other and not doing investigation. So he took the gun and whatnot. And I just didn't really see any of this coming, which means that this was good. I like stories when you really think the story is gonna go in one way, it goes in another way, and this was surprisingly a very good twist. I like how they blended in fiction with real life events because of, most of us we know our history that there were some people that were picked up and that were innocent of being involved in the assassination of Malcolm X. Well, allegedly, but as we know, some of them got out, and I think there was another person that he was released, and he was rewarded a million something odd judgment by the state or something like that. I'm not sure and whatnot. I'm just doing this commentary off of the dome, but I just really like how the writers here mixed the fictional with the real life. And and at the end of this particular plot, Omar unfortunately goes to jail. Unfortunately, they have a tape recording of him where he's talking about, killing Malcolm X. But we all know that he was really just faking what he was saying so he can get the real perpetrator's confidence. So Bumpy and all them can get the drop on those guys that were in that mosque in New Jersey. But it's a shame that I mean, you had Omar that started out as a nemesis of Malcolm, then became a trusted ally of Malcolm because Malcolm forgave him, and now he's accused of being in the assassination of Malcolm. Now, during this trial, they do make blatant references to the FBI, the CIA, and the NYPD. And the reason why they did that was because the NYPD was, it came out recently that the NYPD had a hand in the assassination of Malcolm X. But I kind of wish that they kept some of that out because I'm the kind of person that goes for subtlety in my storytelling, and not everything needs to be blatantly spilled out like that, really. But anyway, I mean, this was a unexpected, plot twist and development. And Elise stood by him. And I think her standing by Omar is going to cost her friendship with Betty Shabazz. So if I'm a betting man, I don't think Betty Shabazz is going to want anything to do with Elise after this. But it's understandable Betty Shabazz feels the way she feels because, she witnessed a traumatic event, and when you witness stuff like that, things get blurry. Your judgment gets blurry, and you really have a hard time distinguishing reality from perception. So I think she's in a state of shock and grief. So she's just looking for somebody to hatch on and to blame. And she really just didn't trust Omar. So she's going with that. But I do like how during this particular part of the episode, they included flashbacks of season 3. It was well done. Well done subplot of this episode. Now we jump to Bumpy Johnson. We see Bumpy Johnson, and he's at a new version of the Geechee, and we see Mimi there, as well as Vincent the Chin Gigante, and he's there at the roulette wheel, and he considers Bumpy his boy and whatnot. They're bosom buddies and whatnot. And the Chin lets Bumpy know that Joe Colombo has been released from jail, and if they have a problem on their hands. And, Bumpy doesn't think so, as long as, Joe doesn't start anything or get on their bad side. So as long as he doesn't do any of that, they're on their good side. So that's where they're at with that. And we see, Joe trying to, get back in the good graces of, the commission. He tells the commission how they could outright associate with Chin, being that, he snitched on him, and that, he pretty much this thing of ours to cavort with Bumpy Johnson. But Vincent has the upper hand here because he reminds Joe Colombo his place. He reminds him that he has the numbers. He has more numbers than him, and that Bumpy is under his protection and whatnot. And Joe wants to go back to the Doogie and whatnot, and Chin outright says no, and he gets the other families to side with him. So effectively, the Colombos are frozen out. Joe tries to sneak in through the back door. He goes to Stella to try to see if she could sweet talk her father into letting him get some of that, but she isn't really down with it. So he comes up with a plan to have the Chin whacked at a meeting at the restaurant. But the plan fails because Stella shows up, and she has an interesting deal for Columbo and whatnot, so. But the thing is, he's going to have to go through her and not through her father because her father doesn't trust him anymore. So we'll see where this story goes from here. My little bit of criticism here is, to me, it's kind of unrealistic, not kind of far-fetched that they would elevate Stella to being a conciliary and a right-hand woman, so to speak, to her father and whatnot, because, the mobsters, they were very sexist. I mean, the only thing women could really do in that life was to cook and have kids. That's pretty much what they were good for. And in a way, they kind of make allusions to that in a dialogue that Joe has with some mafiosos in the background. So we'll see where this goes. And we have Mamie. Mamie is always gonna be in the mix on this. She had a meeting with Cyril deGrasse Tyson, who, as we all know, is the father of Neil deGrasse Tyson. And Mamie came to Cyril to ask about the grant, to help out with businesses and whatnot, so Bumpy can open up his business. And Cyril wasn't really down with that. Cyril thought that Bumpy was just gonna use that to open another gambling or whorehouse operation and whatnot. And Bumpy truly wants to go legit. And speaking of which, the quandary with Bumpy in this episode was that he was struggling whether to go back and sell Doogie or to not sell Doogie. And he ultimately chose not to. I mean, he ended up getting some Doogie from the Italian that was killed for violating the territorial agreement, and he returned the product back to Vincent, which pretty much surprised him. And Vincent was like, "Why'd you guys could have sold it, and I would have known nothing about it." But Bumpy wanted nothing to do with that, really. So I guess he's changed, but we'll see how long the change holds up. Because if you're a historian like I am, at the time of Bumpy's death, he was up on charges of on a narcotics rap. He was indicted, I should say, but he had a heart attack at that at his favorite restaurant. So we'll see where this all goes from here and whether he's truly has changed. But the whole crux of this is Bumpy wants to open up a club, and it's called Club St. Clair. And I assume that the St. Clair part is named after his former boss, Stephanie St. Clair. I like to wink and a nod to her, so hopefully there may be a chance that we get to see Stephanie St. Clair because she's still alive as of 1966. In fact, she passes away in 1969, a year after Bumpy. So I hope, we just don't get a mention of her name, that we do see her. Maybe there's a scene where Bumpy goes to her mansion and sees her and for advice or something, or maybe she comes to the grand opening of his club, because in the later previews we see that he does get the club up and running and whatnot. Now let's get back to Mamie. Obviously, Cyril turns her down. We find out from Mamie that Congressman Powell is in Bremen because he is avoiding fraud charges brought to him by Congress. So unfortunately we won't get to see Giancarlo Esposito play Adam Clayton Powell this season. I liked his performance as Congressman Powell because that was one of the highlights of the show, but maybe we'll see him next season. So But anyway, getting back to Bumpy and the Chin. The Chin tried to make a play to partner up with Bumpy in that club venture, but Bumpy wasn't having that. He said no to Chin, not once, but twice. Chin's first proposal was he wanted to go 50-50, and Bumpy said no. And then Chin later came back to him and said, I want to go 60-40 with you. Bumpy gets 60 and he'll take 40. And Bumpy still said no. Chin was like, why? And Bumpy's reason was, you know something, for all my life, I did business with you, whether I wanted to or not. And I wanted something that was completely my own and that was completely black owned. And he didn't want any of the Italians or the five families to have anything to do with his new venture. And Chin was like, you know something, this is New York. You're going to be involved. We're involved in one way or another. But, you know, Bumpy stood on business and said no and meant it. But I don't think Chin is going to let that go because, you know, you can't really say no to them guys and expect them to take it on the chin, pun intended. So we'll see where that goes the next episode. And you know, there was the plot where one of Chin's guys was dealing outside of the Geechee, and he was spotted by one of Bumpy by Chance and Pettigrew, who alerted Bumpy and of course Chin by proxy about it, and they went out and you know they confronted the guy. And Chin killed the guy and said, "This is what friends do and whatnot." So, and I think, you know, Chin did it because he still wanted Bumpy in his pocket and under his control. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see if Bumpy is still going to be under the protection of the Genovese family or he's on his own. So, we'll see. We'll see where this plot goes from here. I am very interested in it. But there was a lot of stuff brewing in here. I mean, in the court scene with Elise, we get allusions to her joining the Black Panthers, so that will be interesting. Frank Lucas doesn't appear in this episode yet. I looked at the summary for the next episode, and he makes his appearance in that one. And the title of that one is called Country Boy, so I can't wait to see it. And while we're on the subject of Frank Lucas here, you know, I mean, it was a foregone conclusion that Frank was going to show up in this series and whatnot based on the popular narrative here. And I'm just curious to see how they're going to depict Frank here and how it's going to differ from the American gangster depiction. I'm also curious as to how they're going to handle or if Frank is going to have any scenes with Mamie, because real life Mamie didn't have no love for Frank. And I think that this should be shown here as well. But, you know, something, regardless of accuracy or not, I think the inclusion of Frank Lucas in this show is going to be an intriguing one because we get to see two very different journeys. We get to see one gangster that's pretty much at the conclusion of his career, and we get to see another one that's at the rise of it. And you know the and the commonality here with Frank and Bumpy is they're both from the Carolinas. Bumpy's from Charleston, South Carolina, and Frank Lucas, he is from North Carolina. So it'll be interesting to see what their interaction and the dynamics were. Now, by the previews, I was led to believe that the two of them were going to be antagonists this season. But obviously, that's not going to be the case. It just seems like they have some misunderstandings here and there, and towards the end, they become allies of some sorts. Because we're looking at Frank Lucas in the beginning of his career and whatnot. And eventually, Bumpy probably is going to see a little bit of him and Frank and is going to be his mentor. I'm just making a prediction here, but I think Bumpy is going to be his mentor and whatnot. So I can't wait to see what happens and how all this plays out, you know. So Overall, I give the actual episode 3 stars. This is pretty much just the build up episode to set the stage for the other episodes to follow. I'm wondering if we're going to see Omar again and how all that is going to play out. But if it does play out like real life, I don't think Omar is going to get out anytime soon. And I think he's pretty much going to spend the rest of his life behind bars. So, and as far as the Black Panthers, I can't wait until they get into the mix of things. I think they're definitely going to get caught up, not just in activism and campaigning against police brutality. I think they're going to cross paths with the mob because, you know, I read that a lot of Black Panthers, they were involved in shaking down criminals and even robbing them and whatnot. So my prediction here is I think the Black Panthers at some point is going to rob maybe one of Chin's shipments or Columbo's and whatnot. And that's how, you know, Bumpy gets back in the swing of things. So be interesting to see where this goes. So unfortunately, we're at the 21-minute mark. But, you know, something, I had a lot to say here about Godfather of Harlem Season 4. And I hope you all are still with me. So audience, tell me what you think. Let me know in the comment box. This is Iron Will Media.